What decade did Mercedes engineering peak in? This is a pretty common discussion on YouTube. There's a great video right now that I can't remember whose video it was, but it's a good video. It's called "Did Cars Peak in the 90s?" And what I see a lot of is discussion about Japanese cars, but not a great analysis of the Mercedes product. And so some people always ask me when they're getting into their first Mercedes, where did Mercedes peak? Where did their development peak? And we're going to look at a couple of different scenarios here where Mercedes issued a peak product that was the best it could be, because there's not one, there's not two, there are three of them. So the first time that Mercedes peaked was in the window between 1968 and 72. And during that window, there were some epic misses, but there were also some massive wins for the brand. Some of the massive wins included the 72 280 SE 4.5, which many people view as the ultimate W108. The car eschewed the complication of the 6.3-liter 300 SEL and delivered usable power in an affordable package. And many of these cars are still around today. And that's really the metric that I'm using. I look and see how many of these things are on the road. The next window where Mercedes really peaked was, well, you could say it was the years from 1982 or 83 to 1985. Now, the reason I say this was because this was the absolute best expression of Mercedes 123 development. The 123, in my mind, and for a lot of other people, I'd say the smartest of Mercedes owners. Peak Mercedes will always be the 123 diesel. And regardless of which model you look at, whether it's the 83 240D, which was the last year the model was sold in the United States with its unfussy, practical, cable-driven 100-mile-per-hour speedometer, its illuminated visors, again, 83 only, its more comfortable seats, or an 85 300D with its flawless shifting and absolutely perfect, balanced, beautiful 85 injection pump that was precision-timed using a great tool, a really nice tool actually at the factory called an impulse counter. These things were, a position indicator. That's what it is, not an impulse counter, a position giver. Position indicator. These cars, there's so many of them still with us today because they were built right. When you look at a 1985 300 SD with its airbag and ABS systems, many of which still work like they're supposed to, it's impossible not to say, yeah, I don't think Mercedes actually did better than this. And they didn't, because remember that in our world, things have to happen fast and quickly. It's not acceptable to buy a car and then hold on to it for 15 years. Oh no, that's too long. But the third peak is really a tough one. Now, for me, that third peak would be the window between 1990 and 1993. Last W126, last W201, even the 201 was a great car in this window. Last W124, and that peak with the 124 continued all the way to where they rolled out the E300 diesel. But there were some other peaks that we have to look at in Mercedes engineering in the 90s, because it's not just like one peak at the beginning of the 90s. Actually, those cars that were not so good when they were released, like the E300 210 chassis or the 129 chassis, actually those cars got better towards the end of their production runs. So I'll make the argument that 1999 to 2002, maybe we'll say 98 to 2002 to get the 140 in there. When you get those last 140s, those well-developed 210s, those well-developed 129s, that's a pretty good peak. And actually, I don't discourage people from buying those cars. If you have the right mechanic for them, I'm not the right mechanic for those cars, but if you have the right mechanic for those cars, you're good to go. Should be a very happy camper. The question is, figuring out which peak Mercedes car is right for you. Now, the first peak in Mercedes engineering from 1968 to 72 represented some key principles that we never saw again that were not bad. Remember, Mercedes' #1 goal with their cars was and always has been efficiency, whether it was the efficient development of power or fuel efficiency or lightweight or efficiency in maintenance. The 1968 to 72 cars, everything is maintainable, repairable, serviceable. The valves are adjustable. The switches of the car can be taken apart and repaired if you're that kind of guy. The D-Jetronic system, every component can be rebuilt by the right electrical engineer. But you also have to grease 17 suspension fittings every 1,500 miles. You have to adjust valves every 10,000 miles at minimum. You have to change oil every 3,000 miles at minimum. You have a lot of stuff. You just have a lot of stuff to do. But you do those things, and the cars are like tanks. They really are. They're quite amazing. Now, the second peak, the 82 to 85 peak, was a peak because you had cars that needed less maintenance. They still need valve adjustments, but you don't have to adjust 16 valves. You just have to adjust 10 of them, or 8 if you have a 240D. That window was a pretty good window because the cars were less maintenance intensive and they went longer between major mechanical services. You don't have to do a valve job every 150,000 miles on a 300D turbo like you would on a 280 SE. Now, things get a little bit more interesting when you're trying to bring those cars back to a peak. See, here at Pierre Hedary, we sort the cars for an uncertain future. I asked myself the question, is this going to, if I see a problem in the car, in 10, 15 years, is anyone going to be able to address this problem? Probably not. That's why I say find new old stock valves and put them in, because in 150,000 miles, if the car needs a valve job, chances are technology will have progressed to where somebody can actually make a valve. They'll be able to feed it into a computer, the computer will measure the whole thing, and they'll just spit a valve out that's made of the right materials. But we're in a spot right now with technological development where that doesn't happen, and that's one of the reasons why restoring these cars is so hard, because these cars were built using machine-intensive and labor-intensive processes. Now, when Mercedes entered their third and fourth peaks, you could see that there were items of the car that required no maintenance and other items that were a real nightmare. Like in 1990 and 91, the 350 SD and SDL didn't require valve adjustments, but they did require valve jobs. The CL600 didn't require any engine maintenance other than oil changes until everything cooked itself to death after 200,000 miles. You had a bunch of plastic parts and O-rings to replace. So every peak has a valley when you acquire the car that needs a bunch of work. Anyway, keep this stuff in mind, but there's some great Mercedes out there that are outside of the peaks. The 115 diesels, for example, even up till 1976, they were always dependable cars. The 450 SLC 5.0, the 560 SEL, no matter what year it was always a good car. So was the 420. The G-Wagon was always bulletproof. Was always built to a low standard interior-wise, though, so you're never going to get a perfect one until you get to the mid-90s trucks. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications.